It's no secret that I love motorcycle racing. I'm seated here next to my Triumph Daytona 675R. I love going fast, but what I love even more than going fast is seeing the world's very best riders duking it out bar to bar in MotoGP. It's the most intense, high-stakes motorsport events out there. I mean, it makes F1 look like it's racing for babies. And in my opinion, motorcycle racing is kind of slept on. It's always seemed to be this kind of oddball motorsport that's never really reached the popular zeitgeist, and it feels a little left out, doesn't it? And with so much technical knowledge, rider and team lore, it can be a little daunting to get into. So today we're going to talk about MotoGP and motorcycle racing. I'm going to show you guys that it's actually not that hard to get into, and you should definitely watch it. We're going to talk about how it started, how it's changed, and get you up to speed as a beginner and get you watching some awesome motorsports content. I mean, how else can you pray to our Lord and Savior Valentino Rossi if you're not watching MotoGP? Even though you should know by now that Valentino Rossi is not competing currently in MotoGP. Okay, so let's look over the history. MotoGP is the premier class of motorcycle racing. It is the fastest bikes in the world with the most technology. They're completely bespoke prototype machines, and they're a class above traditional superbike racing, which features homologated normal road-going motorcycles. These bikes cost upwards of $2, $3, sometimes even $4 million a piece. They have carbon fiber frames, insanely high-tuned engines, and they're truly bespoke creations. It started all the way back in 1949 with the FIM sanctioning Grand Prix events. Before then, you had road-style races like the Isle of Man TT and other road-going places, but this was the first attempt to really formalize and professionalize motorcycle racing. After the FIM sanctioned these events, constructors could then get together and compete in a professionalized and regimented way with set up rules. Because before then, you just had a bunch of different regulations all set up around the world. Grand Prix racing is established into 3 different categories currently. MotoGP is the premier class. That means it's the fastest and most powerful motorcycles. Currently, the bikes used in MotoGP are limited to 1000 cc and have a minimum weight requirement of 346 pounds. The engines must be 4-stroke and limited to 4 cylinders, with the most common configuration currently being the V4 engine. We did a really cool deep dive on V4 versus inline-4 engines if you want to find out why V4s are more popular in racing currently in MotoGP than inline-4s, with the notable exception of the Monster Energy Yamaha team, which currently uses an inline-4 engine, even though they're testing a V4 right now, and they will probably phase out the inline-4 altogether. Teams are also limited to the number of engines they can have allocated per rider and per bike and per team, and even the number of tires they use throughout the year. Some teams are given special concessions because of their performance in prior years to help them catch up. If you've been following for the past couple of years, you know that Ducati is currently the most dominant manufacturer in MotoGP. It all started with the genius of Gigi Dall'Igna several years ago, exploiting the loopholes inside of the rules to give an aerodynamic monster motorcycle that could just outperform everything else on the grid. Gigi and Ducati quietly got to work behind the scenes, developing one of the most comprehensive motorcycle packages ever seen in Grand Prix racing that has been unbelievably dominant. Ducati has not only won nearly every single race for the last calendar year, but also locked out nearly every single podium as well. If you watch any race in the last couple of years, pretty much the top 5 or 6 are always Ducati machinery. Ducati has their Desmo Sedici GP25 machine, which uses a 90-degree V4 that produces an estimated 300 horsepower. These bikes literally spin the tires all the way through 6th gear. But we know now that MotoGP is obviously the premier class, they have the fastest bikes and everything, but in 2027, there's actually quite a few rule changes coming to help out the series, balance the powers a little bit, and just shake things up. They're going to be downsizing from 1000 cc's to 850 cc's. They're also going to be limiting the amount of aerodynamic elements that the motorcycles have. We like to talk trash about winglets here on the channel because most street-going motorcycles have no need for winglets, but at the highest level of motorcycle racing, those aerodynamic elements have created these kind of monster bikes that have different elements of downforce and the ability to stick to the ground more when they're lean, using different ducts and elements on the tail section of the bike. The other big advancement in MotoGP in the last few years, credit to Gigi Dall'Igna once again, was the so-called ride height devices, which basically allows the motorcycle to squat down really low, both on corner exit and on launch at the start of the race. These devices will be banned in 2027 as well. The motorcycles are also going to run a synthetic style fuel, which is going to be for sustainability. And the biggest change that's happening in 2027 is the tire manufacturer changing from Michelin to Pirelli, which is going to change everything. The tires, specifically the front tire, is what gives the rider so much feel and understanding over the machine. If you watch the riders brake into the hard braking zones, they squish the front end of the bike, collapse the front fork, and then they get all that information transmitted to their fingers and their hands and all the way to their brains, and they can understand where the limit of grip is. I mean, these guys are really superhuman. You should see the way that Pecco Bagnaia, or of course the GOAT Marc Marquez, breaks into corners. It is beyond belief. So no more ride height devices in 27, different tires, all these big changes. So honestly, right now is a really cool time to pick up MotoGP because you're about to see the changing of the guard in a very big way. Beneath MotoGP is Moto2, the intermediate class, and one that I'm particularly fond of because they actually use 765cc semi-production mill engines from Triumph, the same engine that is found in my Daytona, albeit a little bit bigger. Moto2 really functions as an important proving ground for future MotoGP riders. It's arguably seen as one of the toughest categories because everybody's vying for a seat in the Premier class. The bikes utilize either a Callax or a Boscoscura frame fitted to the Triumph motors. So it's almost like a spec series, but again, the differences in frames and differences in setup make all the difference. Unlike MotoGP machinery, these bikes are really bare bones. They have no traction control, no ABS, obviously, no ride height devices, no aero. They look more like what you'd think of a normal racing motorcycle. And again, because I ride a triple cylinder bike on the track, I love watching Moto2 because it's closest to what I ride on track. And beneath Moto2 is Moto3. In Moto3, all of the bikes use 250cc 4-stroke single-cylinder engines. In person, they are small, they are tiny, they weigh basically nothing, and they go like stink around corners. This is where all the young and upcoming talent is trying to fight for their way into Moto2 and ultimately into MotoGP. But make no mistakes, these are no rank amateurs. To get into Moto3, you have to be a ridiculously talented rider that proved your worth in Rookies Cup or other talent cups further down the pipeline, or even a feeder series in Spain all the way back when you were like 5 years old. If you want a really cool explainer about this feeder series, Jeremiah over at Big Time did a fantastic video about the pipeline from starter rookie all the way to MotoGP, and it's a really cool video. I highly recommend you check it out. All right, so what's the format for MotoGP throughout the year? Well, it's a world championship, so they go to all sorts of exotic places and race all around the world and almost all continents. We currently don't have a race in Africa, but you'll see races in Argentina, here in Coda and Austin where I live. There's tons of races in Europe. You have a race in Phillip Island in Australia, Thailand. You have races in Malaysia, Japan. It is truly a world championship, and if nothing else, it's really cool to watch the sport just to see this crazy traveling circus go all around the world. In 2025, there's going to be 22 Grand Prix events. The MotoGP calendar spans from about March to the end of November, and it's been increasing little by little year over year. And a race weekend is no walk in the park. Nowadays, you have Friday as practice and really a sort of pre-qualifying for Saturday's qualifying event. Saturday also features a half-distance sprint race every single race weekend, and of course on Sunday you have the main event, the Grand Prix. So if you've ever been out to a track day and you're trying to get yourself acclimated to run some fast lap times, these guys basically just get 45 minutes on Friday to get up to speed, and then the next practice session on Friday is already pre-qualifying for future qualifying on Saturday. So it's kind of crazy how these guys get up to speed so fast and rip the fastest lap times on these racetracks. For me as a diehard race fan, it's really enjoyable to watch Friday practice to see who's getting up to pace the fastest, who's having the average fastest lap times, and who's doing well on worn tires. You can typically tell who's going to perform really well on the weekend by watching some of these key metrics on Friday. Also, a big shout out to Simon Crafar, who has sorely missed inside of the Friday practice as the technical announcer on the MotoGP World feed. I believe he's now working on the safety board. for Dorna, so he's no longer actually a commentator. But Friday practice was always so sick with Simon Crafar. Very missed.
You know how much we love Rockform phone cases and handlebar mounts around here, but did you know they have an entire lineup of products that can further take advantage of your existing case? Your Rockform phone case is literally the key that unlocks a whole ecosystem of other products aimed to make your life way easier. Rockform's cases have notoriously strong magnets, like really strong. So strong that if my phone is in my pocket, it will sometimes pull my kitchen cabinet doors open if I stand too close to the handles. That's literally happened. To further take advantage of the world's most magnetic case, you could get yourself the magnetic power bank. The power bank is so strong you can attach it to your phone and set it in your motorcycle tail bag or backpack and not have to worry about them losing contact and missing out on valuable charge time, which is a huge game changer for motorcyclists on the go. You can also take advantage of their car accessories like the wireless magnetic car vent mount that keeps your phone magnetically mounted to your car's air vent while it's charging up wirelessly. If you're a motorcyclist, skip the cheap accessories and get the best of the best that's going to stand the test of time with Rockform. They've been a long-time supporter of the channel for over 4 years now, and I truly stand by their brand and their products. I've used them daily all the time. If you want in on the Rockform action, click the link in the description and use the code YN25 to get 25% off your order. That's YN25 for 25% off of your order. Thank you to Rockform for supporting today's video. Now let's get back into it.
So how do you end up being a world champion in this series? Well, of course, you have to win races, but you don't have to just win races. In order to be competitive in MotoGP, you have to be finishing on the podium more often than not and not crashing out of races. On a Grand Prix weekend on Sundays, first place gets 25 points, second place gets 20 points, third place gets 16 points, and it kind of goes down from there. In the sprint, you basically get half points as well for the top 9 who finish. There's 3 primary championships throughout the season. You of course have the prestigious Riders' Championship, which every guy wants to win. This is when we talk about Marc Marquez or Valentino Rossi or Pecco Bagnaia, who has been dominant in Ducati, or even last year's champion Jorge Martin, who has had a terrible season, by the way, starting off on that Aprilia and just getting injured non-stop. I really feel for the guy. You also have the Constructors' Championship. This is points that the manufacturer accrues based on the position their bikes finish. So if you have Ducati locking out the top 5 every weekend, you can almost guarantee that Ducati is going to win the Constructors' Championship because they're just collecting so many more points. Again, in current MotoGP, Ducati is wildly dominant, so don't be surprised if you start watching and you're like, geez, it's only Ducatis that win every time I watch. And of course, you have the Teams Championship as well. Teams are designated by 2 riders and 1 factory that they've chosen. So for example, you have the Lenovo Ducati factory team with Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia, but you also have the satellite squad of the Gresini team, which runs a Ducati motorcycle featuring Alex Marquez, Marc's brother, and Fermin Aldeguer, a rookie from Moto2 last year. You can also see this with Yamaha. Monster Energy factory Yamaha has Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins currently, but they recently picked up the Pramac team, and they actually have Jack Miller and Miguel Oliveira, who is now currently injured because Augusto Fernandez is filling in for him. That's one thing about MotoGP, these riders do get injured quite a bit, unfortunately. It is a dangerous sport. So in talking about teams, let's talk a little bit about what makes a factory team versus a satellite team. Factory teams are owned and operated and ran by the manufacturer: Honda, Ducati, Aprilia, KTM, and Yamaha. Factory teams have enormous budgets and usually the top riders and arguably the best machinery on the grid. Independent teams, on the other hand, are privately owned, sometimes also called satellite teams. These are teams like Trackhouse Racing with Aprilia, Prima Pramac with Yamaha, or Gresini with Ducati. But within independent teams, you do have satellite team and customer teams. Satellite teams receive support and assistance from the factory, and most satellite teams nowadays operate in that way. Particularly Ducati, who has been incredibly successful in sharing their data across all of their satellite teams. Customer teams, on the other hand, lease a motorcycle from a factory, but they also run without any support. And as I mentioned, currently all independent teams in MotoGP are in fact satellite teams that receive support from the factory, because support from a factory means that you're either going to be in the podium contention or not. As mentioned, Jorge Martin won the MotoGP championship last year, and he did so on a satellite Ducati, which was kind of unheard of in the modern era, but it goes to show you how much support that these bikes are getting from the factories themselves. Now that you have a basic rundown on what MotoGP is, how it's scored, what the bikes are, and how the whole thing is set up, let's talk through some current rider lore so you get a little bit of understanding of what's going on the grid. All right, no doubt the biggest talking point for 2025 is the fact that Marc Marquez is on a factory Ducati and he's cleaning up shop. Marc Marquez is arguably one of the most talented riders we've ever seen in the sport. He actually won the title in 2013 as a rookie on a Repsol Honda and has been doing nothing but winning ever since. However, in 2020, Marc suffered a huge crash in Jerez. He broke his arm. He had a ton of issues with the recovery and the timeline to get back on the bike, and he ultimately lost about 3 years of his Grand Prix racing career. He was in and out of the paddock, in and out of surgery, and Marc just had a really tough time. So much so that he actually quit his factory Honda contract 1 year before it was set to expire to jump onto a satellite Ducati last year. This was an unprecedented move for a rider like Marc to make, and it was pretty crazy at the time. But Marc proved that when you jump on a competitive motorcycle, you can do great things. Now that he's on a factory Ducati, he is certainly the most favored rider to win the championship. Last year champion Jorge Martin suffered an incredible injury recently at the Losail circuit at Qatar. He broke a bunch of his ribs after Fabio Di Giannantonio collided with him on track, and it was really ugly. Jorge Martin had actually just come back from another injury, and he's recently added to the Aprilia squad after winning the title in 2024. Jorge Martin would be a rider to look out for if he were on the grid, but unfortunately with his injuries and his recovery, I don't think we're going to see much of Jorge in this coming year. Another rider to keep an eye on is Pecco Bagnaia, the two-time world champion from 2022 and 2023, and who nearly won in 2024, but Jorge Martin just pipped him at the end. Pecco is an incredibly talented rider known for his careful and thoughtful and analytical approach. He has a calm as a cucumber sort of demeanor, and he's very interesting to watch on track. Pecco has this gentlemanly vibe about him, and when you see him on track, he never goes for super aggressive moves. The other rider I have to mention, of course, is Fabio Quartararo, the 2021 world champion. Currently riding on a beleaguered factory Yamaha, who has sort of lost its footing since 2021. Fabio is one of the most talented riders on the grid, and I hope that he gets a motorcycle that helps him prove that. He has this beautiful, silky smooth riding style. He brakes incredibly late, and his overall vibe is kind of like your little brother who loves sneakers and Gucci tracksuits. He's also one of the 2 French riders on the grid, and his nationality is a bit rare in MotoGP. The other big thing you're going to notice is that the factory Hondas no longer have Repsol liveries on them as well. Honda and Yamaha have had a really tough time. The European manufacturers have really taken over in the last 4 or 5 years, and we hope that the Japanese bikes make a big comeback in 2027. And of course, we have to mention the wonder kid, Pedro Acosta, rookie winner in Moto3, which is really crazy, a world champion in Moto2 after having a pretty decent first year. He did injure himself, unfortunately. And then in the first couple of races in 2024, looked like the second coming of Christ. The kid is super talented, has baby alien energy, and we're really excited to see what he does. KTM is currently facing some issues internally in their race team, but we really hope that they get their stuff together. And there's some rumors that Pedro might even move teams as well. All right, boys, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into MotoGP. I really hope you end up watching because it's a great way to support motorsports and support the show. Nobody paid me to make this video. I'm simply a fan of MotoGP, and I love spreading the good word. Thanks so much for checking out today's video. I truly do appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later.
Oh, I love being here inside of the warm embryonic fluid of Valentino Rossi. Me and him just sharing foods together. Maybe he's gonna eat some pizza or some pasta here in the hills of Tavullia. But you know where else it's nice and warm and cozy is this next episode of Yami Noob. You can click on right over here. I'd love for you to watch it. But anyways, I'm gonna stay here hanging out. Me and him might go onto the track later, but I'll catch you guys later.